Hello and welcome to Wine with Wita, the podcast that is dedicated to engaging with health professionals and caregivers in meaningful discussions. I'm your host, Rita Shamoon, or as my clients call me, Wita. I'm a pediatric speech pathologist and I am so excited to have you here. Each week, we deep dive into connecting you with caregivers and healthcare professionals, sharing their insights, stories, and key takeaways to help you with your child's diagnosis and your journey. Whether you are a parent, healthcare professional, a lifetime learner, or simply a wine enthusiast, you're in the right place. So let's sit back and relax and enjoy today's episode. Welcome everybody to another episode of Wine with Wita. Today I have a mother, a disability advocate, an amazing businesswoman, and a humble human. I have Jenny Nechvatal from Innovative Disability Solutions. Welcome, Jenny.
Hi, Rita. Thank you for having me.
Now we have a story. This is a very beautiful story. And when I received your email, I felt like a celebrity, to be honest.
Well, you are really.
Thank you. So when I received, so I started my podcast, and you were one of the first people to contact me to be a guest on the podcast. Now, would you like to share the story of how you came across Wine with Wita?
Oh, I'm trying to remember now. That was a little while ago. It was through BizCover, wasn't it?
Yes,
Yes,
that's right.
That's right. Yes. So they had were doing their grant. They had a grant available, and you had to apply for the grant, and you had been the previous winner. So they had your entry that you had to do, like a minute video, wasn't it? And
Yes.
Yours was there, and I loved what you had to say. And being the mum of two children with a disability, speech therapists, OTs are just some of our most favourite, amazing people in the world, because you had such an impact on our boys' development. And I probably just really resonated with you and what you said. So I went, I have to follow this lady and listen to what she's got to say. So started listening to some of your podcasts and loved what was on there, and thought, I think I could, I'd love to chat to Rita on her podcast. So that's how I contacted you. So.
And now we're here. So I think that's just such a beautiful reminder of surrendering and letting the universe align what is meant to be. So from winning the BizCover competition that led to you with your insight and your experience in the world of disability, to then using the platform to share your own story. I just love that. I think that's just like a love story, don't you think?
Definitely.
So Jenny, before we get started, I'd love to discuss your very impressive resume, CV. Let me just tell the listeners, Jenny is an early childhood teacher with over 30 years experience. She has 2 children with a disability, which led her to writing a book about disability and within the childhood sector. You are a very busy woman. You run 2 businesses, Innovative Support Coordination and Innovative Disability Solutions. You're also a member for the Aspiring Leaders Forum, and also you contributed to another book, which is A Carer's Journey: Stories from the Heart. Wow. I don't think superwoman is the best adjective to describe who you are. Please, Jenny, tell the listeners about who you are and what led you to your journey.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm a mum of 3 children, actually. Sometimes our daughter gets a little bit left out, so we have to make sure the boys always got a lot of attention and focus, because they are the ones that are living with a disability. So our daughter Kate is 25 and our boys are now 22, which seems amazing. So they were diagnosed with what is now called level 3 autism, intellectual delay, and they're nonverbal. So they were diagnosed at 2 years and 3 months. So I was working as a director at an early learning centre at that time because Tony had chosen to be home as their carer. He wanted to be stay-at-home dad before our daughter went to school, so he had some time with Kate. And then once they were diagnosed, I actually continued working. He became their full-time carer. So that continued my experience in the early childhood sector, and absolutely loved it, and it was a great experience. But I did find towards the end, I was frustrated that educators didn't always understand where parents were coming from. And that's simply because they didn't have that lived experience. Until you have that lived experience, you really don't know what something is, So I wanted to write a book that explained to them what it was like to receive that diagnosis so they could have some more understanding of what a parent goes through when they have their child diagnosed with a disability. And then also had the early childhood teacher perspective as well, because it was always really frustrating when you did have concerns about a child's development and the parents just didn't want to hear it. So it sort of came from those two perspectives. And so, then I included some suggestions on how to have those hard conversations with parents, because it is always hard to go and have a discussion about a child's delay in their development. And sometimes there are educators that are put in that sort of position when they don't have a great deal of experience, because there's such a high demand. Well, there's not enough early childhood educators to sort of fill the positions, and sometimes they might have only been in that industry for a few years and they're in quite a responsible position, and it's difficult to have those conversations. So I included that in the book as well, and some information about the NDIS, because that's a huge area and it's hard to understand. And that's what my other business is, being a support coordinator for NDIS participants, because I could see that families, or even just older participants, didn't understand their NDIS plans and didn't know how to access services or services that were suitable to them. And so I started that business 4 years ago when I was just tired of seeing families not getting what they should. So I've always loved advocating for families, whether it was in that early childhood space or whether it's in that NDIS space. So that's how I came about to have the two businesses.
This is the book for anyone interested. It's Embracing Disability in Early Childhood, which I believe is accessible on Amazon, and I'll include the link in my show notes. I read this book in a few days, and what I loved about it, it combined your personal lived experience, but also a reference point for parents to then say, this is what I'm concerned about. This is how I deal with the educator. But then on the flip side, when the educator is like, okay, how do I talk to the parent without disregarding their overwhelming emotions and overwhelming, sometimes being quite anxious with the unpredictability of their child's future. And I love how they intertwine together. So then we're really reinforcing the aspect of joint partnership. It's not parent and educator alone. It's let's work together for the goal to support the child, not against each other. And even myself as an allied health professional, I feel many young professionals entering the industry would be really useful, because it is the lived clinical experience that changes you as a clinician and shapes you to be more empathetic, understanding, and know how and what kind of questions to ask the parents, especially within the early stage of that denial part, which you spoke so in quite detail here. Now, I know this might take you back many years, Jenny, but they were twins. The boys were twins, yes?
Yes, they are, yes.
Yes, they are. Let's talk about when you went to the pediatrician appointment. So you have your eldest who's 3 years or so older than the boys, and she's reaching her milestones appropriately for her age. Then you notice some signals that you're like, this isn't right. What? I guess it's so interesting because you're an educator, you know the milestones. On the flip side, as a parent, how did you navigate that process?
I was in complete denial. And considering that I have all that early childhood training, I just totally disregarded it. And I admit I was in complete denial. So it was family members sort of sometimes saying, oh, maybe you should get the hearing checked, you know, those sorts of things. And probably my husband was more sort of on top of it. He was going to a play group where Zach would just walk around the perimeter, just walk around the fence line. And it was a play group that was set up by TAFE. And so they were able to sort of raise their concerns as well. And then we spoke to somebody else who was sort of in that early childhood sector. And I had worked with her with children at our service that had a disability. So once she actually said, yes, I really have concerns, I tried all the, they just need to play more. We just need to, you know, do all those early childhood things with them. I mean, I can remember they were toe walkers, and that is always a sign of autism. And I can remember saying, the only children I know that walk on their toes have autism, but Ryan and Zach are not autistic. So I was just in complete denial, complete and utter. And then after, yes, having the feedback from the people at the playgroup and this other person, we made an appointment with the paediatrician, and he just basically, probably after 5-10 minutes, he just said, Jenny, Tony, your boys are autistic. And it was just so blunt. So then from then on, it was understanding what autism was, how to help them best. We were extremely lucky. We had an amazing early childhood intervention service here in Wagga, and the staff that they had there were amazing. And their first speech therapist is now their speech therapist again.
What a journey.
And then the second speech therapist that we had there, once she left that organisation, she opened up her own practice, and we stayed with her, well, until the boys turned 18, because she was paediatric trained. So once they turned 18, so they really became part of the family, those therapists. And that's that's the beauty of it. And it is so good having those people on your journey, because you really need to have those people to help guide you, but give you that knowledge that you just don't have as a parent, because that's not your training. And we were just so lucky with the therapists we had. So so that's how it came about. So total denial for me until I had to accept it. So
and you explained that quite beautifully in the book. And just that phrase, Jenny and Tony, within 5 minutes actually, your boys are autistic. And it actually makes me reflect on the service delivery and how professionals provide news to parents. Now, this paediatrician would be diagnosing children all day, every day. So those words diagnosed with autism just float out of their mouth, But it's the receiving end, which we have to always remember, that when we are diagnosing a child, this is the first time these parents are hearing these terms. This is the first time we are confirming the doubt these parents have carried with them. And it's a heavy weight to carry. Now, Jenny, could you go into the whole process of how did you lead to accepting the diagnosis?
That's probably an interesting question. And look, acceptance probably didn't come till there mid-teens. I think because you always, I think when they were younger, there was a lot of comparison. I guess you compare with, the stage that we had expected them to be at. And you'd see, like, say, kids age 10, 11, riding their bikes around the neighbourhood. And it was like, that's what the boys could be doing. We could have a bit of a break if they could go and do that. They wouldn't be dependent on us the whole time, because their intellectual level is probably, say, between 18 months and 3 years, except for being able to operate YouTube and things like that. They do that much better than we do. That technology skills, it's like, oh. How did you find that in your iPad? Anyway, so it probably wasn't until just maybe those late teens that you probably had full acceptance and just went, well, this is who they are, and this is what they can do, and this is the support they need. And I guess stopped thinking back, I wonder if, or what would they do? Or we might have conversations about, I wonder what job they would have had, or something like that. But it was no longer in a regret way. It was because Ryan's the sort of person that if he can get somebody else to do something for him, that's what he'll do. Like, he has all the support workers, wrapped around his little finger, whereas Zach will do little jobs for you.
Yeah.
And we were saying, Zach, would be such a good employee, and Ryan would be like, do I really have to go to work today? So I guess bit by bit, maybe we accepted things. I think in that first stage, you're just so busy, I guess, coming to terms with it, learning all the things that you needed to do, in reading a lot. And information wasn't as easily available as it is now. Like, we couldn't just jump on the internet and Google. There just wasn't as much information. The support groups were sort of, actually, we didn't really have a formal support group at that stage. It was just talking to people that you knew, either through their school or through the early intervention group that we went to. So I think it was just gradual, because it was just so busy, just learning about the diagnosis, what autism was. And because every child with autism is different, so what might work for one child doesn't work for the other. And, and then we'd often have, with the OT, something would work for a little while, and then obviously their body would get used to that, so it'd be regulated, and they'd have to try something else, or the boys would come up with some new little stim or something that we went, okay, now how do we deal with this one? So I think there was just so much ongoing learning and everything, that acceptance just sort of had to come gradually.
Yeah. You know what I find so interesting is that your journey started over 20 years ago, and you mentioned the aspect of being so busy and researching the information yourself. Fast forward 15 years later, new parents have access to a wealth of knowledge, financial support through NDIS, which I feel that financial pressure with accessing so many services back when you started would have been a big burden for yourself. Could you just give the listeners the perspective of how access to service and the financial burden it was for you in that early stage without NDIS?
Well, actually, with the service that we accessed, we didn't have to pay for it.
Okay.
It was
Faxia?
a free service.
Oh.
I'm not sure back then. I don't think I ever looked into that. I just knew that we were able to go.
Up until what age?
There were times, it was till they went to school.
Oh, interesting. Didn't know. I've heard of Faxia and Better Start, but I believe from memory, like this is years ago, up to $12,000 or $20,000 for the duration of the child's, I think up until the child is 7. And then the rest that the parents have to fund it through their own financial means.
Yeah, once they were at school, we did have to sometimes fund things, but Tony was extremely good at advocating for them and finding funding. That just from different government organisations and things like that. So we were extremely lucky in that way, that he was so good at doing that. But yes, the NDIS, once it came along, it was just such a huge relief, because you actually had a bit more control to a certain extent, because we used to just be told this is how much respite you get. So it was like once every 3 months we would have a weekend where the boys would go to respite. Whereas with the NDIS, it could be more regular, it could be monthly, or as they got older, it became weekly. But it is always access. And because they were so routine orientated and they did have aggressive behaviour once they got into their teens, it was difficult to find somewhere that was able to cope with their behaviours, the boys were comfortable with, and they could go there and be safe and be happy. So it was actually probably a little bit limited in that way. So even though the NDIS has done wonderful things, sometimes it's actually just having, depending on the disability, the services that are available, or just that those services are available, but they are full. They don't always have capacity for new people. So NDIS makes it all much easier, and you certainly removes that financial burden in regard to therapy and those sorts of things. But it's always that access, and finding the good therapists is tricky.
Access, and it is. And I experience that in my own industry, that there's a demand, but just not enough therapists. And this is where that allied health support has come in to take the burden off the allied health world. But again, we were looking at the quality of the therapists that actually understand disability. And I always encourage young students, when I used to work at the university clinical experience is one aspect, but when you're out in the big bad world and you are dealing with multiple diagnoses and severity like level 3 autism, it's not black and white. Every child is tailored to their own needs. Now, I would love you to describe your boys. One thing I don't like is when people say, oh, he is autistic, he is level 3. This is how we identify them as. Now, as a mum, could you please describe your two gorgeous boys? Oh, I don't like, they're men now, aren't they? Two good grown men.
Yes, they are. We still call them boys. And I don't know. I know they're always your babies, aren't they? So, but we sometimes, once they turned 21, we kept on saying to each other, no, they're men now. We've got to call them men. But we all, like boys. Everybody involved with them, we all call them boys. So, so Ryan is very cheeky. Like I said, if he can get out of doing a job, he'll get out of it. He was much more an outdoor sort of person. He always enjoyed going walking. We used to do a lot of walking with him because they were so active, and he continued going for a sort of a morning walk a lot longer than Zach did. Zach's a lot quieter, not quite as social. I think he would have just been like a little sort of bookworm at home, just that quiet sort of introvert type of personality, whereas Ryan is a little bit more outgoing. So but both just love a routine, like love to have their routines. And it's interesting because they'll start a routine and it will go for a little while, and then all of a sudden it'll stop. So that was always the really tricky part. You'd have a routine going, and then all of a sudden it would stop, and you go, oh, well, what do we do now? We live just sort of 2 houses away from like a small local shopping centre, and Ryan used to love going up in the mornings and, buying some cheese and bacon rolls, because they both love cheese and bacon rolls. And he did it for, I don't know if it was 2 years, or I can't remember. And then he just gradually started to drop off. Like he wouldn't ask to go every morning. So he'd be going every second morning, every third morning. And then, so I'd still have to go up like sort of during the day and buy the cheese and bacon rolls, because they were still expecting them to appear, even though they hadn't gone to buy them. And all the staff, like, so he knew all the staff up there really well, and they'd all say hello to him. And, and when I would go on my own, they go, oh, where is he? I said, I didn't want to come today. He goes, oh, it's probably because it's too cold. He'll start again. I'm like, no, he's not going to. But anyway, you can think that. And because they thought, oh, it's gotten too cold. But I mean, the previous winter, I can remember going down there when it was freezing. It was the same when we used to walk, because they were always early risers, Ryan especially. And there'd be some mornings at 6 a.m., I'd be taking him for a walk because he wanted to go for his walk, and it'd be like 1 degree, and I don't like the cold. So,
Yeah, no, that's too cold.
and then suddenly he just went, no, I'll go every second day, go every third day. So, yeah, they're certainly independent and make up their own minds about what they like. And yeah, Zach's got a bit of a sweet tooth, and Ryan was always a little bit more savoury. But yeah, and Zach sometimes used to help me cook, like if I was doing pikelets or something like that. But yeah, whereas Ryan's like, look, just cook it and then I'll eat it.
Yeah. Are they non-speaking, or are they using a device? Describe their communication.
They have Prolo Go, which is what they started using when they were at school, and mainly that was for food requests. They did use it a little bit at school, but I think the way it was set up at school, they had to go through too many screens to get to what they wanted.
Yeah.
So they mainly use visuals, or just will actually take your hand and show you what they want, or by their facial expression, or if they want some food, they'll just go to the cupboard and get it. Ryan was very good at using the iPad for communicating, asking for food, whereas Zach would be like, well, I'm just going to go to the cupboard and get it, and then I'll bring it to you and you can, do what you need to do. But I think once they moved out of home, because they're now in SIL accommodation, so they moved out the end of July full time. It was a gradual transition, but actually it was probably only about 6-7 months, so it actually went much better than we thought. I think once over there, I don't think he uses the communication iPad, because I think it's just a different space, and even though we always provided it as they transitioned, because they started off with one night, then they go to 2 and increased till they were there full time. Even though we provided our communication iPad, he was still like, well, no, not going to use that. So
yeah. And it's so interesting you raise the reluctance that they don't want to use the device because they've become so independent in accessing what they want, like going to the cupboard. Now, I deal with many young parents and young children where we're introducing these devices, and one of the concerns is it's so hard to implement this on a regular basis. With your own experiences, could you give advice to parents with the whole device aspect and how we can encourage them to persist with using it?
I think when they get something from it, so for Ryan, it was that, I'll get my chips. If I ask you, I'll get my chips, because he loves his chips. And I think it's just consistency. And I know it's really hard to be consistent, and we weren't consistent all the time, because some nights you're just too tired and you just think, oh, look, you want some chips, just have them, here you go. Like you don't want to go to, I want chips, please, on the iPad. But it is just consistency. Yeah. And I think what also worked is that even though if they didn't use the iPad, then we would still tap on it to show that this is how you can ask for it. So, and that's probably the main bit of technology that we've used with them. But even with when it was visuals, it was still, tapping on it. If they didn't tap on it, then we would tap on it, or we might occasionally sort of pull it off the Velcro and say, oh, this is what you want. So I think it's just that consistency, which is hard. But and that, I guess it's role modeling as well, that you're showing how to use it. So and keep it as simple as possible, because I think our speech issue was just so good when she introduced it, that it was initially just I want, and then the item, and then she introduced the please. And Ryan and Zach used to do the iPad, but you only ever get the I want and the item from him. But Ryan would do I want please, or whatever please. So
what about like other
once again,
requests, like such as going to the bathroom, going outside, getting a task completed, such as opening a box? Were they that independent that they just did it themselves, or would they use the device to complete those requests?
They would probably just come to us to ask for things like that. So they are, they're incontinent, so they're still incontinent. We did try toilet training, but it just didn't take. So after years of frustration, we just went, we're done with that. So they are in pull-ups all the time. If they want to go for a swim in our pool, they would tap the visual, because they only seem to want to do the food items on the iPad. And I don't know if that came from, like I said, at school, I think there were just too many pages for them to go through, and it was just, and I guess in a school environment it was busier, but they sort of had to go like through probably 3 to 5 different tabs to get what they wanted. So by the time it was just too long for them. So and quite often would just take us to what they wanted as well. So if they wanted a DVD changed, they would just bring that to us.
And then show you it to you. Yeah. I wanted to talk about your relationship with Kate. Now, with my experience working with parents, 99% of their energy is with the special needs child, and rightfully so, because their needs are significantly high. How did Kate not necessarily deal, but manage her own to-do lists, her own aspects of school and so forth, when your needs are quite high? I'm making an assumption here, please correct me if I'm wrong. It would have been really hard to divide yourself equally to ensure that they get your needs met. How was that experience with you?
I think we were really lucky because Kate's very organised and sort of a high achiever. She was like in the gifted class, all that sort of thing. So we sort of we didn't go middle of the road. We went gifted, intellectual, delay. Why go middle of the road? So she was always very, very goal orientated, focus orientated, organised. So as she moved into like high school, that was, I guess, just a benefit to her, because we very rarely had to sort of hassle her about schoolwork and stuff, because she knew what she wanted to do. And amazingly, like, she could just, because Ryan and Zach would always have their iPads going, and Zach would always has his the highest volume, no matter how many times you turn it down. And they're just vocally noisy. They make a lot of noises and bang on walls, and if they're having escalation, they're very noisy. So, and she was quite interrupted quite often. Maybe Tony might need help with them or something like that, or she needed to do something for one of them while he was with the other. So she had an amazing concentration level, and I think it was really good when she went to uni and she was living on campus, because I think she could block everything out. So I think it was a bonus in that way. When she was younger, we just tried to still do things with her. And I guess when we're expecting the boys and we knew we're having twins, then we always said, we'll make sure that we make special time for Kate, because, I think it's just busier with twins than if you just get one sibling. So I think we always had that mindset. And then she was incredibly lucky with the friends that they had. They were very accepting of the boys. And one particular friend, we actually call her our second daughter, because she preferred to come to our house and spend time with Kate at our house, no matter how chaotic and insane it was, which to me, I'd be going to my friend's house all the time if I was Kate, but they enjoyed that. That's what they did. Her friend Melinda, she'd just help out when she had to or whatever. So, I think special. It just, it is. I guess we just focused on having that time with her, and there was always something happening with the young carers group, so we got her involved with that and made sure that she was able to go to different events, and made sure that she got to the athletics carnivals that she had to go to. So I would quite often be driving around country New South Wales, taking her to different athletics carnivals and things. So just making sure that she didn't miss out. But yeah, and I guess there were times where we felt she did miss out, but you try and make up for that as much as you can, really. So
it was like a blessing, like with all her wonderful strengths, it's actually supported you as well. Yeah.
Yes.
Which I think is quite remarkable. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. You mentioned the boys are now in a home for care. What was that like as a parent? That would have been a significant transition for you.
Yes. Yeah. So we became empty nesters. But I guess it was all it took a long time in coming. And I was certainly ready for it. Tony struggled a little bit more, but in the last couple of years, Zach's behaviour became very aggressive. So it was very, very hard to cope with. Ryan went through an aggressive stage, probably, I don't know, year 8, 9, 10, and then sort of Zach went into his. So we had a lot of injuries, a lot of difficult situations. So really, in a way, we were ready for them to go. And the organisation that they're with, we have a lot of trust and faith in them, and we know that they were setting it up for the boys to succeed, and they have. So, and I guess because we did have a transition, it was easier because it just happened gradually. So and we go and visit them now, and we can see that they're happy and content with where they are. So that makes it a lot easier.
In the book, you mentioned the aspect of isolation and the loneliness that comes with raising a special needs child, not only one but two, and how your circle around you changes, as well as families' opinions and that. You also mentioned the high divorce rates of families who have a child with special needs, and that's not spoken enough, and the importance of supporting your partner, supporting each other. Could you give any advice for young families going through the ongoing stress of raising a child with special needs and how they can support their partner too?
Yeah. Probably I'd give advice that we probably didn't take on all the time, making sure that if you can, because I know it's very difficult, just have couple time. I think that just gets lost in the busyness and the need for keeping routines, and it's hard to find a babysitter. You know, sometimes somebody doesn't want to come and look after children that could be having a meltdown and an escalation, or you know, that need peg feeding or something complex like that. So I think tapping into your community or family members whenever you can, and finding support groups. And there are so many more available now, even if it is sometimes online, because you need to be able to speak to people that are in your same circumstance. So because it is so much easier to understand, you don't have to explain yourself. You just know that people are going to get what you're saying. And that's why I've set up the Autism Families Thriving membership, which I'm not sure if I've told you about, but it's for families that that have children on the spectrum, so that they can come into that safe space and talk about the realities of what they're going through, but also help each other with ideas and strategies as well. Because sometimes
how can people access that?
I can send you the details. So
please, that would be great, and I'll put it in the show notes.
The link is on my website. Sometimes it's good talking to people that are a couple of years ahead of you, and you can say, oh, when your child was this age, or when they did this, how did you, what did you do? And the tricky thing with autism is, like I said before, sometimes something works for one child but not the other. So you sort of need almost 10 ideas to actually get one that will work for your child. So you sort of need this big input of information. But yeah, sorry, going back to parents, it is making sure that you do have that time, even if it's for yourself as well, just having, even if it's just 5 minutes a day, some time for yourself and some interests of your own as well. So Tony continued to be sort of involved in Kate's athletics and training, and he trained some of the other children that she ran with. So that was his little escape that he was able to go and do. I had a hobby of weaving and doing weaving classes for a while. So it was just that own identity, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was lucky because I had work.
I love how you mentioned own identity. Like, I think lots of mothers go through that identity crisis where they were raising young children and then their children are grown up. It's like, well, what am I? Who am I? But that identity completely changes, especially when you have special needs kids, because you were advocating for your child for the rest of their life. And it's like, when can I focus on me? When can I do things for me? And it, like what you said, really work on how you identify as and tap into those, just to keep that sense of yourself as well.
Yeah. And it's very difficult.
And I guess that's what leads me to the amazing work that you've done with your two businesses, where you've taken your lived experience, not only professionally as a childhood teacher, a childcare teacher, sorry, but also with raising your boys, to be this beautiful business that young families or even older families can access, so they can have that relatability and familiarity, so you can know what they're going through as well. So let's talk about those two businesses and how we can support families with that.
So Innovate Support Coordination, we provide support coordination services to families. So that's a funding stream within the NDIS. So not every participant gets it, but our role is to connect the families to the services that they need. So it might be they need an OT, so we source an OT for them, speech therapist, those sorts of things. It might be that they have access to the community, so they need a support worker that can take them out into the community. All those sorts of services that are under the NDIS, we support them to connect with them. If there's any issues, we can help them with that part as well, because sometimes you're just so busy with your child that has that disability that to sort of ask extra questions or to raise a concern is just so overwhelming, because you've just got so much on your plate. So we support them in all aspects of the NDIS. So your reviews, review meetings, all those sorts of things with the NDIS. So we can ring the NDIS on their behalf, excuse me, and ask questions, help them to apply for additional funding, those sorts of things. So that's the support coordination side. And then with Innovative Disability Solutions, initially it started with the book, and then once I had a book launch here in Wagga and then one in Griffith with the early childhood services, and there were so many questions coming from the educators that actually I've established some workshops that I go and do at the early childhood services now. So one's around understanding autism, one is around sensory regulation and how to make those learning spaces comfortable for children that might have sensory dysregulation. There's another one about the hard conversations and how to have those conversations, because like we talked about before, it is hard to do that. And also just with the last service that I worked with, they were having difficulty getting their parents to engage with early intervention services. They had one, it was actually the nan, she had care of the grandchild, and the paediatrician had said to her, don't worry about early intervention, just wait to, I know. It's frightening. Don't worry about early intervention. Just let him go to school. Let him just play at daycare, and then just when he goes to school, we'll start early intervention. Now, we all know early intervention is 0 to 5.
Who's this? Did someone tell the pediatrician to just go look at some evidence-based practice?
I think they were all so cranky they couldn't think of what to say. And because it was an amazing service, but they had just so many children that just had different either disabilities or not quite diagnosed behaviours, all that sort of thing. And they had huge, it was really difficult for them. And I was reading through all the information because I go with that workshop, I go and visit, look at their service, look at the sensory issues that there may be, do a report. And I was doing this report and I went, oh my goodness. And I just contacted the director and said, would it help if I did a workshop for the parents about early intervention, what it is, the benefits, that sort of thing? And she went, yeah, that's great. Just send me an invoice. And I went, I haven't even written it yet. I haven't done that. So I then did that workshop and it went really well. So that's something for those parents that, are sometimes not quite sure what early intervention is, I guess, how it happens, how do they actually contact, a therapist, how does it look? And it always looks different in every sort of community, because I know that community was an hour and a half away from me, and the people they connect with in the early intervention space are different to the ones that, are here. So it's having that local knowledge as well. But early childhood educators always know those sorts of things. So it's working as that team once again. And then, yes, having the Autism Families Thriving membership so that those families can come into that space where they know that, they can either say, oh, it was a great day, this happened, or it was a really lousy day, or what happens, has your child done this, or, all those sorts of things where it's just, that you're going to be understood no matter what, because, we couldn't, talking about sometimes what happened in our day, other parents just would not understand because it's not lived experience for them. So it's that lived experience and sometimes just being heard and understood that just means you can go on the next day and and keep going.
Jenny, my heart is like filling with so much love for you, because I feel like you were the fairy godmother for so many young families that are just in the rut of their child's diagnosis between understanding NDIS, understanding advocacy, and on top of that, understanding the strategies that the allied health team are doing or encouraging for the child amongst everything else. And I just find it so refreshing that you are such a valuable resource that parents not only can access through this book, but through the other services that you offer. And your message is the concept, just someone who can be heard, someone who understands. And that, I think, even as a parent, gives you that sense of serenity and allows you to feel accepted, and that you, despite all the challenges and the worries that you may have, there is that slight hope there that everything will be okay.
Yes.
And it's about surrounding yourself with a wonderful family. So Jenny, you are now this fairy godmother, and I absolutely love that.
Thank you.
So if anyone would love to access Jenny's book and any of her services that she mentioned on the podcast, particularly the Autism Forum that you mentioned, it would be all on her website, and I'll include that in her notes. You feel free to follow her on an Instagram page, which is Innovative Disability Solutions. Jenny, thank you so much for coming on Wine with Wita. I loved it so much. And one thing that I love, when we first met, you said back in your time, you wish there was a Wine with Wita that you could have accessed the resources. And that just makes me feel like I've won an Oscar. Like, I love it. I love it.
Well, you're an Oscar winner. I'm a godmother. We're set.
Does that mean we have to hit Hollywood soon?
Oh, absolutely.
Hey, look, so if Baz Luhrmann is watching this, we've got a musical ready for you. Should we call it Wine with Jen and Rate? I think we can call it that.
Perfect.
So, Jenny, I always ask all my guests, and I'm sure you've heard this on the podcast, if you were to apply one word today to make a better version of yourself tomorrow, what word will it be?
Oh, I'd forgotten you do this bit. Determined has popped into my mind.
Oh, please elaborate. Determined. You're the first person to say that.
Oh, okay. I think, well, I guess just in the experience of being a parent, there were days where, yes, you would go to bed and you just had a really bad day and you would just be like, oh, how do I get up again tomorrow? But you just have to be determined that tomorrow was going to be better. I think when you're doing therapy, you also have to be very determined because you have to keep going, and you sometimes have to go, yes, I know you don't like doing this bit of therapy, but we have to do it. And I think just, sort of in my businesses, I need to working with like the NDIS, you need to be determined that you can get that extra funding, or you can find that therapist. And then in my other business, it's being determined that I can, help services and keep on contacting services and, getting no one out there so that they know that they can contact me and I can help them. So I guess, being determined to help and connect with families.
I love that for you. And yes, determined is a beautiful way to describe your journey and the resilience that you show as well. Thank you again, Jenny, for your time, for coming on Wine with Wita and sharing your beautiful lived experience and story with my wonderful listeners. And for anyone who wants to reach out to Jenny, please access the show notes. I'm sure without a doubt she'll be happy to support you. For everyone else, thanks for listening to Wine with Wita, and I look forward to bringing you another episode really soon. Take care. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Wine with Wita. I hope you found some new inspiration, learnt something new, or gained a fresh perspective. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd be so grateful if you please leave a 5-star review, as it really helps the show get in the ears of new listeners, plus it takes 5 seconds. If you're keen for more strategies and insights, then head over to Instagram and follow RS Speech Pathology.